KLIF News Time 7:48. A few months after being freed, after he was held captive for 5 years in Afghanistan by the Taliban, Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl will finally be questioned by investigators today. As a matter of fact, starting at 8 o'clock our time this morning, and we could find out whether his comrades are right, those who say that Sergeant Bergdahl was a deserter, not just AWOL. To give us more insight into what will be happening at Fort Sam Houston in about 10 minutes, we're joined now by Brian Bouffard, a criminal defense lawyer and former U.S. Navy JAG Lieutenant Commander. Brian, it's good to talk with you again. Thank you.
Hey, David, Amy, good morning.
Good morning. So what is the procedure here, and how will it differ from a similar investigation in civilian life?
Well, this is still the fact-finding investigation, but as a person himself subject to the UCMJ, the investigating officer is bound by law to advise anyone that he's questioning if he suspects them of having committed an offense. So clearly, there's a suspicion that Sergeant Bergdahl went unauthorized absence, deserted, and potentially other offenses that he may have come to light in the investigation thus far. So it's the investigating officer's duty to inform him of that and inform him that he has a right to remain silent, a right not to make any statement that would incriminate himself, which is the same right that you or I or any other citizen has. So that's going to be the first issue there, which I'm sure that he and his lawyer have already discussed in depth, is whether or not Sergeant Bergdahl is going to make any statement at all.
I was just going to ask about that. Is it likely we're going to even hear anything?
Well, the lawyer, and he's chosen an excellent lawyer, Gene Fidel, a professor out of Yale Law School. He's a genius of military justice. He knows more about this than anybody because he not only has the facts that's been developed thus far, but he's also had the opportunity to talk with Sergeant Bergdahl. So I'm quite certain that they've already made this decision. They probably made it together yesterday. But knowing what I know, or at least what I think I know, if I were his lawyer, I would be advising him not to make a statement. I don't think there's any benefit that could come to him from making a statement.
So there's no way that he can avoid a court-martial? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, he could certainly avoid a court-martial because if he refuses to give a statement, then the investigating officer will say, okay, thank you very much, and they'll leave the room. He'll continue on with his investigation through other means, just like any investigator would do, even in the civilian world. And at some point, he will make his conclusions. He'll submit them on up. And if higher authority thinks that there's enough evidence to go forward, then they can make that decision to send him to a court-martial. So that's totally independent of whether or not he gives a statement.
In the end, is it possible that we never find out Sergeant Bergdahl's side of the story?
It's very possible. In many criminal cases, or what may become criminal cases, the accused doesn't give a statement. And so, what was going on in that person's mind at the time is locked in their brain.
So if you were still in the military and involved in this sort of process, what would be your opening question? Aside from the obvious, I guess maybe that would be the opening question. Did you walk away? Were you kidnapped, or what happened there?
I don't think that I would ask very many leading questions at all. I would want to just get Sergeant Bergdahl talking and probably start off with just some sort of innocuous things like, just tell me what your typical day was like back there in 2009 at your combat outpost. You get Sergeant Bergdahl talking, and then generally sort of focus his attention on the day he left. And, normally follow-up questions will suggest themselves. But I think it would be fairly poor technique for the investigator to just kind of start off asking pointed, direct questions. Those might be appropriate later in the interview when you've raised some issues that you need to clarify.
Have you heard at all how he's doing in his desk job?
I haven't, and I don't think that's been reported at all, but it's very routine. There's nothing unusual about that at all. There's a lot of administrative work to be done in the Army, in addition to being out there practicing with your weapon. So I would anticipate that he's doing just fine.
At this point, one would think after this much time that the investigators would have a pretty clear idea of what happened and what happened to Bergdahl. Will they try to direct him in that? Will they try to point him in that direction, or will they just try to find his story completely free and clear of everything else that they've been told?
It's hard to tell what he will do, since I've never met him and don't know his technique as far as the investigating officer is concerned. But, again, if you just kind of get him talking and just try to find out what was in his head and what was his motive and what was his intent when he left, that's really the important question, because that is what could solidly turn this from either an accident or an intentional unauthorized absence up to a desertion. I'm also quite certain he's going to want to talk in fairly lengthy detail about the circumstances of his confinement and who he met and what he was told and what he told them, and all sorts of information that really only Sergeant Bergdahl knows. We don't have any witnesses who can tell us what his 5 years of captivity was like.
All right, be interesting to see what actually comes out of this questioning and investigation, the questioning beginning at 8 a.m. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate your insight, as always.
Anytime.
Brian Bouffard, criminal defense lawyer and former U.S. Navy JAG Lieutenant Commander.